Welcome to Africa Matters. I'm Grace Korea Kanja. African football made history at the 2026 World Cup with 9 of 10 teams advancing to the knockout stage. But a recurring issue soured the celebration, conceding late goals, often after the 80th minute. So what can the continent learn from the highs and the heartbreak? So the expanded 48-team tournament featured a record number of African teams, with 10 nations qualifying. That's double the previous allocation of 5. While the continent celebrated unprecedented participation, only 2 nations, that's Morocco and Egypt, progressed beyond the round of 32.
They really played very, very well, and I'm very sure that a lot of countries were so much shocked.
A very impressive performance, but of course we saw the experience working out against them because they failed, many of them, to manage games. We saw Ivory Coast, they were leading 2-0, they ended up losing the game. We saw Egypt again, they were leading 2-0 against Argentina, they ended up again losing the game. But overall, I can say that this is a performance that Africa can build upon going forward.
Now, while the African Cup of Nations victory is still in dispute, Morocco are tipped to go farthest in the tournament, having made the semi-finals in Qatar in 2022. The Atlas Lions did reach the quarterfinals, only to be knocked out 2-0 by France. The North Africans have a youthful team and have already secured a place at the 2030 World Cup. They are co-hosts along with Portugal and Spain.
They fought right to the end, but they didn't have any luck. We hope that in 2030 they'll win. We wish them all the best.
I also know that what we want is to do even better in 2030 on home soil. We want to be ready. We want to be on the same level as Portugal and Spain because they're co-hosting the tournament. I think we've already shown that we're on the same level. Now we'll have to prove that we can go even further.
Egypt also rewrote their World Cup history. The Pharaohs progressed through the group stage with a win and 2 draws. They then cruised past Australia and looked to shock Argentina before a Lionel Messi-inspired comeback saved the holders' blushes.
The players exceeded our expectations more than we ever imagined. We didn't expect that. They were true men and gave us even greater hope. I want to say thank you to all the players in the national team, and may God grant us success next time.
But the real surprise package? Tiny Cape Verde, with a population of just over 500,000. The Blue Sharks reached the round of 32, winning fans and followers everywhere. Veteran keeper Vozinha led the charge with a draw against Spain and an undefeated run to the knockout. Their only defeat came in extra time against Argentina.
I'm so happy. This is the best game I've ever seen. We lost, but to me, we won. We played an excellent game.
Despite Africa's encouraging showing, one trend stood out. Several teams considered decisive goals in the closing stages of matches, particularly after the second hydration break. That has raised questions about fitness, concentration, tactical discipline, and game management under pressure. So let's talk to Fisayo Dairo. He's the chief football writer of ACL Sports, a Nigerian-based online sports publication. And he's been watching Africa's World Cup campaign closely. He joins me from Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you very much, Fisayo, for making the time. Where do I start? We last spoke at the beginning of the tournament. You had hoped Morocco, Ivory Coast, Senegal, and Egypt would go past the round of 32. Morocco and Egypt did. I mean, what's your assessment of Africa's performance, or African team's performance at this year's World Cup?
Well, I think Africa have every reason to be proud of what their representatives have done at the World Cup. Yeah, it's never easy. We have a couple of debutants, and with the kind of performance that Cape Verde put up against Argentina in the round of 32, it's something that Africa really have to be proud of. Having 9 out of the 10 teams progressing from their group, the first time that we had more than 2 teams from Africa progressing from their group in a FIFA World Cup tournament. It's absolutely brilliant. And like I said earlier, Africans and Africa in general have every reason to be proud of what these countries have done.
But Fisayo, we saw several teams let their lead slip late in the matches. We're talking about having a 2-0 lead for 80 minutes, the first 80 minutes of the match, and then somehow losing. How does that happen from a tactical and a psychological perspective? How is that even possible?
Could be a lot of things to attribute to that. Part of it is the mental capability of the players. A lot of them are not really used to this level of football. And apart from that, there is also the quality aspect. You know, if you take a look at some of the teams that these teams considered late goals against, you know that they have superior technical and tactical players. For instance, Egypt, you know, capitulating against Argentina, who are in the final, by the way. And that aside, the likes of Ghana as well, and Congo DR against England. These are superior opponents. So apart from the mental aspect, players getting introduced to a higher level of football, the quality is also important in football, because when you have your opponent knocking on the door from the start of the game, perhaps it's in that final quarter of the game that the legs are tired, you know, the bones are weary. That's when they tend to cave in.
Quite unfortunate for that to happen just 10 minutes to the end of the game. But Fisayo, you're there, you're watching these matches firsthand. Today you're joining us from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm curious about what your experience has been. What has been the highlight for you? I remember at the beginning of the tournament, we were all astonished when the Somali referee didn't make it to officiate the matches following his ban from entering the United States.
The highlights for me has to be Cabo Verde, the debutants, an island from the western part of Africa. And they are there in, they did not lose any game in 90 minutes. Imagine the two finalists played against Cape Verde and they could not beat them in 90 minutes. So it's something to really be proud of. And the Egyptian national team as well, they've never progressed from the group stage of the World Cup. This one, they won a game, and I don't think it's a shame to have lost against the finalist Argentina, although it was very painful the way they did.
Sure, but I also mentioned that Somali ref. Do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, it's disappointing that Africa's best referee could not make it in the end, but some of the African referees represented well. Pierre Acho from Gabon officiated at least 2 games. Amin Omar from Egypt also did 2 games. They can be proud of themselves, and hopefully, in subsequent tournaments, Omar Katan, the Somalian, will have the opportunity to represent himself and his country as well as the continent.
Right. Now, we talked about this last time, but several African teams have relied heavily on homegrown coaches like we saw again at this year's World Cup, locally developed players. How important was that in shaping the performances of the teams? Not to mention what we've seen with Senegal right after their exit in the World Cup.
Yeah, what you saw from Senegal is really an anticlimax that didn't bid well for African football. But I'd like to take the positives from some teams that really did well with local coaches. You know, having local coaches in place makes it easy for the team to know the expectations back home and to know how to translate it on the field of play. More importantly, how to manage, what is being expected and what is demanded from them. Look at Egypt; they have a legend in charge. Look at Cabo Verde; not many saw them coming. And although not many of the players are based in their country, the fact that they have citizens of that country that know the history and the expectations really helped the team to translate whatever they did on the pitch.
Right, let's look ahead now. And what should African Football Federation's priorities? We're talking about youth academies, coaching, development, infrastructure, or just keeping top talent on the continent just to build on this progress that we've seen.
We have to touch on a little bit of everything, but I admit that it's going to be difficult to keep the top talents on the continent. I don't think it is necessary, actually, but we have to invest in infrastructure heavily to make sure that whenever these players come from Europe, they have good facilities to play on. Now, why I said it's not necessary to keep them on the continent is that look at the players they face in this competition. They are playing at the highest level of football in Europe, in South America. So African football, especially club football in Africa, is still a tad away from where it is globally. So let's invest more in getting quality players. Look at Morocco's template. They go out there in Europe to bring in players of Moroccan origin. Some other countries, also Senegal, Nigeria have been doing it. So invest in top quality talents and add the infrastructure back home. Also, you don't have to neglect the academies back home, because when you catch them young from the 8th grade level, you are able to develop players into those European markets, because such exposure will be needed at this level of football.
Right. And of course, Morocco is set to co-host the 2030 FIFA World Cup. How much of a catalyst could that be for African football as a whole?
I think it's going to be something special. The first time Africa hosted it in 2010, that was when we had an African country getting to the quarterfinal for the first time in the Black Stars of Ghana. And when you look at what Morocco have achieved back-to-back, semi-final in 2022 and quarterfinal, this particular one, then you can expect that they will want to take it a notch higher when they are co-hosting with Spain and Portugal. Other African countries too will want to join them in the party. It's going to be there for all. We could see from what we've seen at this World Cup, although the top 4 teams in the world are in the semi-final, but we see what the host nations did in getting to the round of 16, into the quarters. Then Africa can join hands with Morocco in 2030 to advance the development of the game and to show the whole world that the game keeps growing and keeps developing year after year.
Indeed. Fisayo Dairo, the chief football writer of ACL Sports, a Nigerian-based online sports publication. Thank you very much for your time and for such valuable contribution. Still to come here on Africa Matters.
I am Maimunaba in Banjul, the Gambia. From the fields of the North Bank region to the international markets, Gambian cashew farmers hope to tap into new export opportunities, but their ability to meet global standards could determine who succeeds.
I'm Sulaiman Barry in Sierra Leone's Eastern Province. I'll be exploring how local cacao farmers are coping with the unexpected surge in demand for their crops and how they are facing up both the pressures and the opportunities that they bring.
Agriculture remains a cornerstone of many African economies, but access to global markets often depend on more than just producing quality crops. In the Gambia, cashew farmers are optimistic that China's new zero-tariff policy could unlock new export opportunities if they can meet international quality standards. Maimunaba traveled to the North Bank region to find out more.
Cashew farmer and exporter Mamadou Salah has spent years cultivating these fields in the Gambian's North Bank region. What was once considered a low-value crop has now become one of the most important sources of income for rural households.
Today it is more than $100, or nearly $1.50. All these bushes around you have become cashew farms. Cashew has changed our lives. With cashew, you can build a house, support your family, and send your children to school.
But for many producers, turning a good harvest into fair returns remains a challenge, as access to international buyers is often limited with pricing frequently controlled by middlemen.
We spend months working on these farms and harvesting the nuts. But because we could not export directly, we sold to Indian buyers. Sometimes they told us the cashew was not up to standard and offered us very low prices.
But China introduced a new zero tariff to 53 African countries on May 1st that's set to run for about 2 years. Data from the China African Research Initiative shows that in 2024, Africa's export to China hit a record $99 billion, while imports from China grew to $179 billion. Even though China mostly imports critical minerals and metals from the continent, the move is giving producers like Salah renewed hope.
Beyond growing opportunities, exporting cashew still depends on meeting strict international standards, something that is shaping how local producers are preparing their goods for the international market.
The Gambia Standards Bureau says it is working with businesses across the cashew sector to help them prepare for export.
To ensure market access and competitiveness of our cashew products, it is necessary to follow standardization, standards that focuses on pre-harvest production operations as well as post-harvest. And part of the post-harvest standard operations are the storage requirements as well as the packaging and labeling standards, transportation and modes of handling.
For farmers like Mamadou Sala, the Chinese duty-free opportunity into lasting economic gains will depend not only on access to buyers, but also on their ability to meet the export and traceability standards required. Maimuna Ba, Africa Matters, North Bank Region, The Gambia.
From cashew to cocoa now, as global demand for the crop continues to grow and supplies tighten across West Africa, Sierra Leonean farmers are finding themselves in an increasingly strong position. The cocoa boom is bringing new economic opportunities to rural communities. Suleiman Barry reports from eastern Sierra Leone.
Joseph Brahma is on his way to his cocoa farm in Lambo village in Sierra Leone's eastern region. He has cultivated the crop for more than 3 decades, and like many farmers, he says he's now experiencing the highest profits of his lifetime.
Cocoa is a new gold for us here because there's no other farming activity that gives us better income than cocoa. Through this, I've been able to support my family, raise 4 to 5 of my children from primary school through university, build structures, and provide for my family.
Global cocoa prices have risen sharply in recent years as production challenges and tighter supply chains affect major producers across West Africa. For Sierra Leone, that surge in demand is translating into better prices and growing opportunities. It's also encouraging farmers to expand production and increase output, while cooperatives help connect growers to larger international markets.
The cooperative use its platform to attract investors to the cooperative, and also they try very hard to train their farmers so that they could produce a very high quality product. They also advocate for better prices and better conditions for its members.
Much of the country's cocoa is grown using traditional farming methods, making it attractive for ethical and sustainable markets.
While Sierra Leone remains a relatively small player compared to major cacao producers in West Africa, rising global demand is creating opportunities. Cacao is the country's second most important export after minerals, though farmers and exporters say maintaining quality standard is key to sustaining this growth. Cocoa has become one of the country's fastest growing exports. In 2024, it exported about $143 million worth, growing about 6-fold in nearly a decade. Demand from Europe is helping drive this growth, with the Netherlands emerging as one of the biggest buyers of Sierra Leonean beans.
We make sure our cocoa is free from residue, no chemical is involved. We are providing technical support to the field. We are all providing all these facilities for us to have good quality at the end of the day that will boost our country.
For Joseph and the 20,000 cocoa farmers here, growing global demand is not just changing export numbers, but transforming livelihoods and creating new hope for their families and communities. Suleiman Barry, Africa Matters, Lambo Village, Sierra Leone.
Staying with livelihoods shaped by natural resources, but this time on Africa's Atlantic coast. In Mauritania, an indigenous fishing community that has relied on the ocean for generations is facing an uncertain future as climate change and industrial overfishing threaten its centuries-old way of life. Hope Kirubi has the story.
On the northern coast of Mauritania lies a protected UNESCO sanctuary. Here, the Imraguen people are the only residents allowed inside the park. They sail without motors, honoring an ancient heritage passed down by their ancestors for centuries.
Long ago, before the appearance of nets and fishing tools, they made their own nets and fishing rods from a tree called titareg. They would carve it, and from its trunk and leaves, they made ropes for the nets. The floats were made from a tree called cork oak, and the lead weights were made from clay that they would burn to transform it.
But that traditional way of life is slowly fading away. As the climate crisis warms these waters, the fish flee to deeper, colder areas, causing local catches inside the sanctuary to drop.
The quantities caught in the Imreguan fishing areas now do not even represent 30% of what they were 10 years ago. There is real, severe pressure on the fishery.
With the catch dwindling, life on shore is becoming difficult. Families are losing both their food and livelihood.
The Imreguan life we once knew no longer exists. Even if it still exists, what remains is something basic because they have nothing. There's no fish and there's no funding either.
Young people here are also being forced to abandon the sea for big cities in order to make ends meet. This makes it difficult to pass on ancient fishing skills to the next generation, leaving this unique community under threat. Hope Kirubi, Africa Matters.
To the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where health authorities continue to battle an Ebola outbreak in the country's east. While the virus remains a serious public health challenge, efforts to contain it are gathering momentum through stronger regional cooperation, survivor support programs, and more medical personnel. Prosper Herring-Gorora reports from Bunia.
Gladys Mungurumbo is a 30-year-old mother of two and an Ebola survivor. Her business stopped when she contracted the virus in May. After recovering last month, she's now working as a post-Ebola care assistant at the treatment center in the town of Bunia.
I'm already feeling well. I've regained my strength. I told myself it wasn't right to stay at home doing nothing. I've started working and I'm very happy to be helping the children affected by this disease.
The disease is changing patient behavior, funeral rites and local practices, like eating bushmeat, as health officials try to limit its spread.
We work with patients. We do what we call cognitive restructuring. We help people affected by the disease to understand and accept their new way of life. This means accepting isolation. The person themselves must understand that they are a danger.
Up care and surveillance of suspected cases. They provide survivors with essential supplies while hoping their testimonies will help build trust with skeptical communities.
Ebola response teams here in Ituri say they are making progress, but they add that much more must be done to help survivors and affected communities recover from the outbreak's lasting effects.
Samaritan's Purse is one of non-governmental organizations running treatment centers. Infected Ebola patients are isolated and treated by replacing fluids and managing other symptoms since there is no vaccine for the Bundibugyo strain.
We have expanded from 40 to 50 and then now soon 60 beds, and our response is going well.
Now, the DRC and Uganda are also stepping up their cross-border cooperation in response to the disease. About 50 Ugandan health experts are in the DRC to work alongside their Congolese counterparts to battle the current outbreak. Meanwhile, the search for a vaccine continues, with clinical trials here in Ituri, as health officials race to get ahead of the virus. Prosper Herring-Gorora, Africa Matters, Bunia, DRC.
And finally, when you were a child, did you imagine building robots? Perhaps you only saw them on TV. While in Togo, youngsters are spending their school holidays designing robots, writing code and exploring artificial intelligence. Brenda Zedaradido tells us more.
From a distance, it may look like any other classroom. But this is not a formal school session. It's a tech camp where 8 to 17-year-olds are spending their school holidays learning about artificial intelligence.
Today I'm working on a project to build a bubble-blowing robot.
Working in groups, the students are guided through the process of building robots and learning the basics of coding using simple material. Lessons are tailored to help bridge Togo's digital skill gap with an aim of inspiring young people, especially girls, to pursue careers in technology.
The main goal of this summer camp is to train young people to become creators of technology, not just consumers of it. That's why we start as early as age 8. teaching some children how to build robots and others how to code software.
Eha Adzara is one of those 8-year-olds, and 2 months of her summer camp begins with robotics, which involves learning engineering skills. For older students, lessons involve developing a software application such as chatbox interfaces, the toughest part of the program.
With what I have learned, I would really like to create a highly effective chatbot to help people.
As AI transforms the world when it comes to employment opportunities, parents want their kids to be prepared.
Today we all know that digital tools are important in everyone's daily lives. They have become completely widespread, and it's important that our children learn about them from an early age.
The International Telecommunication Union reports only 9% of African youth aged 15 to 24 across 15 African countries have basic computer skills, and 90% of children in the continent leave school without digital skills, according to 2025 findings by the International Certification of Digital Literacy. And initiatives like this one could help the world's youngest continent adapt to an increasingly digital world. Brenda Zeda Radido, Africa Matters.
That's our show. What did you think of Africa's World Cup performance? Which team impressed you most? And how can African teams prepare for the next World Cup? Drop your comments on our Africa Matters YouTube or on X. From me, Grace Kuria Kanja. Goodbye.